First of all, I want to tell you about us as a family, just to introduce us to you guys. I think we've all talked individually, so you already know kind of who we are. But there's the full picture, if it will let me. There. So there's our family. We've been in overseas since 2010, so in Africa off and on since 2011. We left with 3 kids and now we have 7. And there's some more news to go with that. We've been living here in Newport, Old Town, ever since 2008 we moved up here to be with the Garretts, and it's been a great community to be part of. I really enjoy coming home to this part of the country. Now, Wycliffe as an organization, we are members of Wycliffe Bible Translators, and Wycliffe back in 1999 got together with several other organizations, and they were competing how long it was going to take to do Bible translation for all the languages that need it. And they said, according to our current pace, it's going to be 150 years before that last translation is even started. That's not okay. That's a lot of people that will pass into eternity waiting for a Bible. Why? Why does it take that long? And so we and several other organizations all got together and said, okay, this is a little bit crazy, but if we're going to do a God-sized vision, we're going to do, called Vision 2025, we're going to start a Bible translation in every language that needs it. Not necessarily every language, there may be some that don't need it, but every language that needs it by 2025. We're going to ramp up the process. We're going to get people out to the field. We're going to figure out other ways that we can make it go faster. And so here's an update on that now. There are more than 7,700 languages in the world. And of that, the number has gone up since 1999, but of the languages that were identified as a need at that point, there are less than 1,000 left now that need a translation. So we've made some progress. And I don't know what the current stats are as far as what are projected. It might not be 2025 when we get all those 1,000 started. But
the last numbers I heard were from 2 years ago. The last numbers I heard with the new techniques and the new pushing more people overseas and everything else, they had gone from 2150 to 2037.
Yeah.
Which I think is even less than that now. Because obviously 2025 is coming up real fast here.
Even if we're not able to finish by 2025,
but they've already taken over 100 years off how long it's going to take. So we're kind of doing this final push of things that's really exciting for us to say, okay, it could happen within our lifetime.
Now, one of the things that we do on the field is stop there.
I just wanted you to notice the green ones have achieved 2025, and there's more countries that have achieved than have. Or an 81 that only have one language left to start. But I want you to notice. But I want you to notice that I don't know if you can see up there where we are on the map, where we work. We work in this country and this country. So they've got a purple one and one of the red ones that are the 4 highest needs remaining in the world. So we're kind of in the middle of where there's a lot of language work left to be done. And the reason for some of that is because those are the hardest places to work, whether it's government interference, civil wars, whatever the reasons are. Sometimes it's a Muslim area, there's a lot of opposition. But there's reasons why those are the hardest places. There's China, Indonesia.
Cameroon is not hard in terms of government, but there's other things that complicate it, and it's just a lot of languages. There's over 300 languages in Cameroon. And so we've been chipping away at that number for 25 years, but
I'm surprised Iran is purple. I think it would be red.
Right? I don't know.
It's not one of the top. Okay, the purple ones have at least 6, and some of them may have 50 languages left. But the red are the top 4, and so that's Indonesia, that's China, that's Papua New Guinea just has so many.
Yeah.
That's Cameroon. So those are the ones with the very highest number of languages left. But I'm sure Iran is up there.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what the stats are, but I'm sure it's up there.
And there's a website websites that you can look into for the details on that, for sure. So, there we go. Now, the country that I guess I have to explain, we have an assignment that's kind of split between two different countries then. We have Central African Republic is landlocked country and it's not very stable politically. And so we can't live there as a family. There aren't a lot of missionaries there, and so our kids would not have a lot of other MKs to be around
Or good school.
or good schooling opportunities. And whereas Cameroon, right next door, has an MK school that's been there for 20 years, more than that. And also an elementary school that's been there for a while. And both of them are really well run. And they have, all of our kids have experience there and they really enjoy it there. And so that works so much better for us to live there. We can be part of a community of both expats and nationals, Cameroonians. And then we can work from there between the two countries. So I do a lot of my work, or some of my work, at least in Cameroon, and then most of my work is in CAR. Either I travel back to CAR now and then, a couple times a year, or I work remotely with people. I'll talk more about that in a little bit.
So how far are you there from the border, and then how long does it take you to get to where you actually work? So 2 questions.
So we do not drive to the border. We have driven across the border, but it is not safe to travel by road inside CAR. So he flies to Monkey. And we don't go with the family.
I take
Stay in
a
Cameroon
bus.
with the kids, and he takes a bus to the other city and then flies to Monkey and flies back.
I take like a 4-hour bus to the coastal city, Douala, and then I take a 2 or 3 hour flight to Bangui. And I'm there.
Where we live is actually the capital city of Cameroon, and that's where the major mission base is. But that's where I can stay safely and have support with the kids while he's traveling back.
Right. I'm just curious how many miles it is from the border.
About 500.
Oh, pretty long.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember if it's kilometers or miles, but it's.
It'd be 500 miles to the border and then 500 more miles to get to Bangui.
So it's pretty long.
It's pretty far.
Yeah.
We go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that last 500 miles would be really rough roads.
They don't. Our mission doesn't allow expats to go out into the countryside at all.
Oh, okay. What
You can be in the city, it's extremely dangerous. They can have you for ransom or there's all kinds of reasons.
Even in your city.
Not in our city.
Oh, not actually.
In the other country that he works in, he's not allowed out in the countryside of that.
Can you drive around Cameroon like to the
Yes.
borders? You can.
Yeah.
Okay. And the roads are not too bad? Or?
The paved roads are good, the dirt roads are not great, but it depends on which part you're on. The
Yeah.
highways are decent.
Sounds like favorable.
So, CAR, there's approximately 72 languages spoken there. And of that, 14 already have the New Testament. Those are ones that have been done recently with our group or with other groups in the area. The Baptist Mid-Mission has been there for a long time. There are a couple of other denominations that have been there for quite a while. And they have done some translation already. And so we've contributed to that. And there's approximately 40 needs that are either definite or very likely. And so there's still work to be done in CAR as well, just not maybe as much work as Cameroon. We just recently published 5 New Testaments, dedicated 5, I'll tell you more about that in a second. Dedicated some of them are almost ready to be dedicated.
They're end groups for each.
Yes. And there's 4 more that are getting very close to completion. One of them is actually being typeset right now, and then one of them will be, the other 3 will be typeset very soon. I'm sorry, take that back. One will be typeset very soon, and the other 2 will be typeset in the next year or 2. They still have a few things left to do. So now Kappa started just recently, just in the last couple of years. Kappa started 8 more projects. They hadn't started any new projects for several years. They were just working on those 8 or 9 projects that they had already started. So this was kind of a new thing. Okay, we're getting close to the end of that first wave. Now we got to start a whole new wave. And a couple of those I helped with workshops to get those projects going and do some of the research to start.
Sorry, what's a Kappa?
Yes, I was about to explain. Kappa is basically, it's the Bible translation organization that is there in CAR. They are not affiliated, or they're in the family of organizations like Wycliffe.
They are a Wycliffe organization.
Are they Wycliffe organization? Okay. And so we don't work we're not members of their group. We're members of a missionary group that works very, very closely with them. So their director and our director they spend a lot of time together. But it works really well. We are able to be there as consultants, supporting what they're doing, but then they're the ones actually doing the Bible translation.
What does it stand for?
ACAPA is Association Centrafricaine pour la Traduction Biblique et l'Alphabétisation. So it's
Say that 3 times fast.
Central African Association for Bible Translation and Literacy.
Okay. Nice.
So this is our group. You can see this was a joint. ACAPA SIL is the name. Is the group that is there. It's NCAR of missionaries. And this was a joint day that we had to celebrate the work that we've accomplished together. Right around the time that we did a bunch of team meetings, so we had a bunch of our team come in. We did our team meetings and we did this joint day together to talk about and celebrate what God is doing. I believe, wasn't that the time when our directors were installed, I think, on that February?
That's 2018, I don't think so.
So, yeah, it was pretty big though. It was just really, really cool to see how we're able to work hand in hand with these guys and support what they're doing. For so long, that's part of Vision 2025, is that we had to change was for so long, missionaries were the ones doing Bible translation there, which, I mean, it's really cool for a missionary. It's a lot of fun to be a part of that process. So the process was really slow. You have a couple or a few couples that would come in and work with one language for 10 or 20 years to do a translation. And we just don't have the personnel to be able to do that for all languages. And also more and more now nationals are getting a pretty good education, enough that they can do a Bible translation themselves. And we can just be there to support them and help them along and train them and do exegesis with them and stuff. And so making it possible for them to do the work means that we can be in support for multiple projects at the same time. But also, the really cool side effect of that is that nationals, native speakers of the language, are going to translate more naturally, more fluidly in their own language than an outsider would. And so why wouldn't you want to do it that way? Except that, at the time when Wycliffe was first starting, there weren't a lot of people that were very well educated enough to be able to do a translation project.
Plus just the ownership of it,
Right.
It's more exciting for them.
That's one of our big things now. The ownership of it really belongs to the churches. And before you start a translation project, you bring together the community leaders. Churches are supposed to send delegates to talk through and help with the workshops and all that. And it's really their project from the start. Right?
The native speaker translators are chosen by the churches, as these are people that we would respect to do a translation. You don't want to have a translator that has a side life that is not respectable, because then that bears on his translation, his work. So it's a whole development that we've moved that direction, but in so many different ways, it's really so much better. And I'm really thankful that we figured that out, because it's kind of a trust issue. Like, do you hand off this thing to somebody else that you don't know how they're going to do it? But I think it's really worked out well. It's been a good learning experience for all of us. And it was time. It was time for the global church to take ownership of this, not just the church in the West. Now, we have a story from one of the guys that I've worked with. His name is Adi Nagidi. He says I probably should just read this for you guys, because it's a great quote. He of course does not speak English, so this is a translation of his quote. "My mother tongue is in Zakara. Everything is so difficult to understand when it's in French or Sango. Sango is the trade language for CAR. And I can imagine the Nzakara people gradually becoming cut off from God, because they will think he's only the God of other language groups, since they have no Bible. And yet, Revelation 14:6 and 7 says to every tribe, nation, language, people, fear God and give him glory. Worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water. But what if my language group is not reached by God's word? What if my people continue in sorcery and magic? How will they be able to worship the God who created the universe? I want my language group to recognize that there is only one creator God, receive Jesus Christ as their only Lord and Savior, and belong to the kingdom of God. I'm prepared to work so that we can have the whole Bible available in our language to transform the spiritual life of the Nzakara people. The trouble with doing a translation in a trade language is that it doesn't sink into people's hearts because you don't usually use a trade language deeply. It's used for trade, and so you can talk about bananas and carrots and buying an animal that you hunted in the forest, but you can't really talk about love and salvation and all these important topics that are in the Bible nearly as fluently as you can in a mother tongue that has those concepts. And so then people, when they try to understand who God is in Sango or even in French, it just means that God is kind of distant. He's not present in my house where we speak our mother tongue. He's only present in kind of the public areas or at church. And so, and then sometimes there's issues where there's just too many meanings that can be involved in one word. And so like you can have, in a trade language, you can have an idea that in Sango, they had a thing several years ago that we heard about where the word for spirit is also the word for shadow. And so the Holy Spirit, as they understood the Holy Spirit, was not present if there was no shadow. And so we have to worship him during the day when we've got some shadows. And or different things, or if it's cloudy and rainy, there's no shadows, then we're on our own. Like, wait.
And if there's animals and believe spirits come out at night, then God's not there to protect you anymore.
So we're on our own during those times too. And so that is also a possibility in a mother tongue, but it's important to get it as close as you can to people's hearts so that they really understand clearly. It's kind of like, I think you guys all grew up with black and white. You probably saw black and white TV, and you were around when you had to switch to color. Have you ever been to an IMAX theater presentation? So you imagine going from black and white to IMAX. It's just so much more vivid, so much more alive. And that's how I imagine that transition would be, trying to do a life as a Christian, trying to understand who God is in a language that you don't really speak well. And finally, suddenly you can read it well and it makes sense for you and it's clear. I think that would be about what the transition would be like to go into an IMAX theater, and it's just so much more vivid. Yeah.
So for that was Sango that had the shadow. So did they, for that, I'm sure there's a Bible in that language?
Yeah.
And so did they use a different word? Did they?
I think they had to do a footnote, or they had to do some sort of a discussion about it, training, and it was just a motivation for us to do more work to really drill down to the mother tongues as much as we can in the local languages. So I've got a picture of the dedication that we did in 2022. It was not, I can't say we did it. We, Akatwa and SIL together.
You helped on all three of those translations.
But I helped with all three of those translations, and I'll tell you more about that in a second. But this guy, the look on this guy's face, he finally has his Bible in his own language. And I believe that is this one here. Mugu. Yeah. It's a privilege to be involved in making that kind of an event happen. And even more importantly than the event, but what it means for people's lives then beyond, that they have God's word available in something that speaks to them. And it's not just written, it's also been recorded audio and foot to Jesus film and all kinds of different things that we've been able to do. So do not pick up your English Bibles, but you can pick up one of these Bibles here that you have on the table. If you want to grab the ones on the back tables there, you can too. So
Turn to Matthew 24.
that's the first challenge. Find Matthew 24. Generally, Matthew is right at the beginning. These are all New Testaments.
Oh, there it is. Oh, the New Testament. Oh, the New
Yeah.
Testament.
Oh, I found it.
Several of these do have your
Matthew.
Yeah, Songo, all of their names, they use French names. I don't know why, rather than transliterating them into Songo. Okay. Anybody want to try? Anybody want to try reading out of your Bible? This is the Songo up here too.
I'll try.
Same as, I think,
Yeah, somebody read.
same as Darian has.
Yes, Darian, read it.
Fade azo afa nzani tene ti kodro ti gibia nzapa na ndo ti dunia kru hongaso siazo ti amara q amani na pekoni fade I q ahonzi.
The word of the Lord. Right?
Already got that.
Okay, now what was it in English?
I know some of those words. I don't know if I so Joni is good.
Johnny's good.
Joni is
It's like a word I
muse.
know.
I think muse or that sort of thing. Kodro, I think Kodro is kingdom and Via is, Kodro Via I think is kingdom or region. And then, doesn't have it on here, but Nzapa is God. I think we have a little bit different version between what you got there and what I've got here. So we've kind of got an idea of what we're going for, and at this point you have to be careful not to just, well, I know this verse, and so I recognize the concepts that, and you bring in, you already have knowledge that you already have of this verse. You have to kind of say, well, I still don't know what it is because I only know a couple of words. Let's try. Anybody else? I've got
English on my computer right
I've got French. Anybody speak French? Rachel speaks French.
I'm hoping an extra English before I die. It's never changing language.
Yeah.
Skibbity. Language changes, yeah. Rachel, you want to read for us?
What, the French?
Yes.
Okay. Cette bonne nouvelle du royaume de Dieu sera annoncée dans le monde entier pour que le témoignage en soit présenté à tous les peuples, et alors viendra la fin.
The word of the Lord. I think it skipped. Yeah, we don't
I
have,
put the English on there. Got it here for you.
we don't have the Jesus book.
No, I don't.
Take that one off. Oh, okay, I have I have recently acquired a translation, a legal translation into English that not everybody knows about. It's called the English Standard Version. But I'm not going to tell anybody, but I'll share this with you
Bring at the stake.
on the slide.
They said, don't tell the Catholic Church in the 16th century.
Yeah, I'll tell you about the history with Wycliffe in a second. If we have time for that. So, And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So we know we understand the message because it's been translated into our language. Somebody put in the work to translate from the Greek into English. And so it's on us as the American church to pass that blessing on to people who don't have that yet, who can't say that yet. And you can walk into a Christian bookstore, and there's like a whole aisle, a whole section of Bibles that you can pick from, right? We have options. And we even have a whole section or two of materials, Bible study materials too. For somebody who doesn't have anything in their language, where do they even start, right? So here is a couple of, switching gears now, couple of snapshots from our time in Cameroon. Of course, we had this event in 2020 that you guys all lived through as well, but ours was a little bit different. Like Rachel was saying at the beginning, I was able to continue working with our teams in CAR. Instead of traveling back to Bangui, like the original plan was, and I would just do a couple of weeks of intensive work with them to work through stuff. I was able to work like a couple of hours a day, 3 or 4 hours a day on Zoom with each of my teams, and I was able to help them through their New Testament checking, or not checking, but the technical checks that was my job. And we were able to get them ready for their publication and their dedication in 2022 in spite of and it was just a few months before that the internet in Bangui finally was strong enough that we could do the kind of video share that I would need to do. I have to be able to have them share their screen with me so I can watch what they're doing. I tried to do it just audio, and it didn't work. So once I got the video share, then I can walk them through, okay, you need to click here, click there, or wait, we need to do this other step first, different things that I can follow along with them. And that was enough for me to be able to help them with that process of working through all those checks. And it was just really cool how God worked that out. That we didn't have to shut down completely like most of the world did. For about a month there, I was working out of our truck until it got too hot in the day. I'd just set up in my truck and I'd be on my computer. And it wasn't great. I don't think anybody would say that time was great, but it worked.
Small house, 7 kids, no office.
Yeah.
That's why.
I say a month in because at that point things were not going well for the kids, and I was the only one that had left the compound basically for that month, and it was getting bad enough that we said, okay, we either have to go home or we need to move to a residential compound where there's other families together and be part of a bubble that's not just our family in a little tiny compound. And that did work out. We were able to move to this place here at the top left. It was 22 other families and people, some of them families, some basically 22 other apartments at least. And we were able to do life together with all of these other families, and several of our kids all had friends that they were able to play with, hang out with without masks. They had a soccer field attached to the area, the compound, and so the kids could go down there and play.
The pictures actually, we were having church outside.
Yeah, for several months in there we did church. We would just meet in this area, this big open area on that compound, and we'd do church because all the churches were closed. And it worked out. I mean, it wasn't great, and eventually things did open up where I could at least travel within the country, and so I did do a couple of workshops within the country so that I did have some experience. I wasn't just on Zoom the whole time. That would have been really boring, right? I don't love being remote. I'd much rather be in person, but suffice it to say, we did finish with Bea, Kaba, and Mugu.
And those are 3 of the Bibles for all the tables.
Yes. You've got Bea here, and back here is Kaba, and then Mugu here. And so those I mean, it's not gonna have my name in it. I just have a little small part of the process. The translators themselves have been spending, some of them 20 years, some of them 10, somewhere in there. They'd spent a lot of time. So I came in right at the end to help them with some technical stuff right before they typeset. But it was a privilege, really, to be able to work with these guys, help them with these things they're kind of complicated, a lot of details.
They didn't grow up using computers.
And these things really needed to be accomplished for them to be able to do typesetting. And so it worked well for me to come in. I had some knowledge of these different kinds of checks and things. So I was able to help them walk through that and get done, so that I had at least one typesetter that said afterwards, if I could get all of my teams to do this kind of work ahead of time, typesetting would go so much smoother. Because he's got a small window that he can work with one team before he has to move on to another team. And so many of his teams, they come in and there's so many things that they haven't worked out or haven't figured out, haven't really made consistent. And so either they have to go home and scramble really fast and work through all of it and come back, or they have to actually work through it there with him. And it just makes for a really, really rushed process versus what we were able to do. We were able to take our time and be careful and think through it all. And I think I'm just really thankful that we were able to find that niche. And there's all these consultants in our team in CAR that could have done this kind of thing, but none of them really knew how to use these kinds of checks. And so I was the one person on the team that was able to step in and help them with that.
That would also pull them away from the other.
Yeah.
They didn't really have time for that.
Yeah, and so it worked well, it fit well. Now the Bogota and Banda Linda, they finished before we came back, but they haven't done their dedication yet. The printing is, I think one of them is finished printing.
I heard they were both at Virgin.
Okay, so they're already on boats, on their way over, and there's a couple more steps in the process. They have to land in Cameroon, they have to get out of the port in Cameroon, they have to be shipped across Cameroon in a truck, and then have to get through the port into CAR and get out of customs there. And it's a lot more steps, a lot of administrative stuff, but it will help eventually. And so these communities are already starting to plan their dedication. And I really, really hope that I can make it back there and actually travel back to Bangui and out to the village with them to do the dedication with them. I wasn't able to do the last one, so this would be really amazing to be able to do this one. These are the three Bibles that you have there on your table. And it's just, I mean, I can't read those myself, but I pick those up and I hold them and it's not the Bible itself, it's not the book itself, it's what it means for those communities, and I got to be a part of that. It's just humbling a little bit. And I jumped again. Here we go. Okay, so this is one example of our, one of the jobs that I did to help them out. The technical checks, basically they have to go through and make sure that their spelling has been consistent. Spell check in a language they don't speak. And so I pulled out one particularly complicated, complex situation that I found, just to give you an example of the kind of things that we're looking at. These are names. All of these are names that are transliterated into the language, but in French translations, they spell Jesse, the name Jesse, father of David. They spell it two different ways based on whether they go back to the Hebrew or whether they're going on the Greek version. And so you have some French versions out there that do Isai, or some versions out there that spell it like we do Jesse. So then they would transliterate both of those, and but then each of those looks like another name, very similar to another name. You have Isai, which is Isaiah, and you have Zes, which is Zeus. Well, you don't want to get Zeus and Jesse mixed up, right? Because they don't have the J sound, so they switch all those to Z, but then that sounds like Zeus, possibly.
Who doesn't have the J from French?
What?
Who doesn't have the J sound from French?
This language, Gael. they don't have a J sound in their language, and so you have to fit it in with some other sound that they have. So then also, you can stick an I at the end of anything, any noun, and it's this one that we were just talking about. So this Zeus that we were just talking about is Zesi, which could look a lot like Zezi, which is Jesus. So you don't want to mix up this Zeus that we were just talking about and Jesus. That's really bad there. What really surprised me after all of this, we sorted through all this, and we checked all of the different occurrences to make sure that they were used in the right place and not switched or swapped. And they did do everything correctly in this case, but and also they didn't change anything. They didn't differentiate these any more than they already had. But they're able to keep track of those different sounds, and it works. Just like, I mean, we have Zechariah and Zachariah. Well, we don't get those mixed up. Oh, I don't know. On a good day, I don't mix them up. And so you have some cases like that in English where, you know, things are very similar, and we're okay with that. But for somebody who's typing it, it would be easy to accidentally type one versus the other. So it was important to do that double check. And there's other cases where we did our double check, and they were really glad that they found this or that. This was a case that I wrote down when I came across it because it was so complex and interesting. But there was other cases where it was like, oh my goodness, I'm really glad we caught that because that would have been really messy. And so that was our job. And being a linguist, it was a lot of fun it was my job to find the potential duplicates and say, okay, you've got 5 words here that look about the same. Are they all the same actually, or do they need to be corrected, or, you know, how does this work? And it was up to them to actually decide, because they're the ones that speak the language. They're the ones that know what these words mean. But we worked through, some of the language had 4,000 entries, some of them had up to 8,000 or 9,000 entries, and we had to get each of those entries to have a little green check mark next to it. And so that meant that we needed to really make sure that we had them all straight, and you can't just go one line at a time. Yep, that's good, that's good, that's good, because then you can mix up, not realize that this one up here and this one down here are the same word.
What do you mean by entries?
Entry means so the word the in English, the would be one word on our word list.
Okay.
And so every single word that's used in their New Testament gets one entry, one line on the word list.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't matter how many times it occurs. It matters that these are all the occurrences that were spelled this way. And the idea was to get no words in there that were unknown or incorrect, but they're all approved and valid. So there were days that it was tedious, but the way we were able to do it, spread it out like we did, we weren't doing 3 weeks of this back to back to 8 hours a day, or trying to scramble and do it before we do the work with the typesetter. We were able to do a little bit at a time, and it worked. I don't think I would want to do this for 40 hours in a week. It would be mind-numbing and kind of make you a little bit tired. So I was thankful for the way that it worked out, that we could do it this way, spread it out. I also did a little more technical of a check here is punctuation. So in English, have you ever seen the meme, punctuation saves lives? Let's eat, comma, grandma, versus let's eat, grandma. 2 different meanings, and the only difference is that little comma. And so that was my job to catch those things as well. And we have some really cool tools that were able to do a lot of that. But those were even more technical than the word list. And so that was our job also, to work through those and try to, as much as we possibly could, to work through anything that would trip up a new person who's just learning how to read and write in their own language. These kind of mistakes could really mess with them if they don't realize that it's a mistake and they just kind of run with it. So I've got an example here in English. it's important to keep track of who said what, and so where you put your quotation marks is important. Some of the times I would find an instance where you had a quotation mark here, but you never closed it, and so where does that quote actually end? Other times they were in the wrong places, and so we had to sort that out. So I've gotten...
And that's especially now that we're going to be doing audio versions, Jesus film, when does that person start talking?
So I don't know how many of you guys can read from that far away. Can I get a volunteer to read the green and the red for me? Somebody to read green, somebody to read red.
Okay, I'll read green.
Okay. And I'll read the white.
I'll do the red.
Okay. So this is an example just to keep track of who the voices are so you can hear. There might be some errors here. Jesus said to him,
Caleb, take up your bed and walk. And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked.
wait, now that day was the Sabbath, so the Jews said to the man who had been healed,
It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to take up your bed. The man who healed me, that man said to me, take up your bed and walk. Who is the man who said to me, take up your bed and walk?
that shouldn't be all one person, right? So the difference is just a couple of quotation marks. I moved the pink one, right, this top yellow one, I moved down to where the pink one is. And then these other yellow ones down here I took out. And then we put them back in, it completely changes who's talking. And so it was our job to try to catch those little tiny details that make a big difference in terms of who's speaking. There's times when you put in when you just leave out a period or a question mark or something like that, and that can get really messy. And so it was a lot of details to keep track of that when the translation consultants would do their work, they weren't necessarily looking at punctuation, and so we were having to do a lot of cleanup just to make sure that this was as consistent as we could. I'm sure we had some errors that slipped through. We're not going to be able to be perfect, but the more the errors, the more obstacles that we can remove, the better.
Are there any languages in the area that you work or nearby that don't even have a written language yet?
Yeah. Plenty of those. We'll be talking about my other job that I'm helping with that aspect of it. So ideally, I was going to be doing 2 or 3 of these workshops every year. We have these linguistic workshops where we come in and we work with a couple of speakers from a language and work through either some aspect of the language. Either we figure out what the sounds are in the language and which ones need to be written down, or we work through some aspect of the grammar or even narrative discourse. How do you tell a story appropriately and stick in little things to signal the beginning or the end of the story? If I start a story with "in the beginning," that means that signals a completely different thing from "once upon a time." If I start at Genesis with "once upon a time," you might think, well, think a little bit weird to me. So our workshops, I only got to do 3 of these our term because I ended up starting back on my master's degree, and so I was doing 1 class a semester, but I had to attend class at least 2 or 3 times a week on Zoom back in Dallas, and so I couldn't be out of internet range, so I couldn't do a lot of travel. So I did get in these 3 workshops though. Tali and CAR was my very first ever workshop of this kind, and I loved it. The Tali guys that I worked with were amazing, and now I believe at least one of them is on the translation team. And then Subula is a pseudonym from Cameroon that I got to work with in the north. And what's great about that one, I got to work with an expert in this field. Ginger she's been doing this for linguistics for years, and she's been doing this participatory methods workshop for probably 10 years at least. But the idea being get people together and work through some aspect of the language together rather than just the linguist off by himself making notes in a book and keeping track of things over 20 years. It takes a long time to do a linguistic study that way, but if we get speakers together and we can accomplish something really amazing in 2 or 3 weeks. And it gets them interested and excited and involved, and they realize, oh my goodness, this is what you're doing, and this is really important, and we need to do this so that we can do a good translation. It helps them unpack their own language and be able to understand how it works so they can do a good translation. And so it gets the church involved. Is that big piece from Vision 2025, getting the church involved, getting them to own and be involved in it instead of just these outsiders coming in and writing a book that we have no idea what it means. So, and then Bagidi, this last one here, I was going to do a thesis for my master's degree, and so I worked with Bagidi, and we figured out how to write figured out what to use for their alphabet. There were several characters in there that were different than the English that we use. Generally, you start out with the Latin alphabet, but then we had to add on some extra characters for different sounds that we don't have in the English alphabet. So I've got a shot from our work here. Those little pink slips on the table were the main part of our work during this workshop. Just sorting through all the different sounds and making piles of, okay, all the words in this pile are, let's see, there you go, there's a pink slip right there. All the words in this pile start with the same letter. So you go, you pronounce them all then, and wait, that one is different. You slide it off and put it in a different pile. And then it just, intuitively, it brings out the differences. It makes it clear that this one is not like the others, and you can sort it out and do it really quick instead of taking years sometimes to decide things that are unclear. So it's just really, really amazing to see how fast it can go with that. And so we've got a phonetic transcription down here. I've got some notes about tone, and some of them we make some corrections on how to spell it, how you would write it. This one is actually spelled correctly. What?
We changed the R.
Oh, did we? Well, the phonetic is a different power.
So how long has this language been written down for?
Since 2022.
Oh, so you helped with it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
excellent.
That's cool.
They
So-
gave that as a workshop.
This was-
First time we've ever.
This was one of the last things that we did in the workshop, was put together an alphabet chart. And so that was the very beginnings of a Bible translation. Now, Marcial, that you saw on the first slide, he and 2 other Bagidi speakers are doing translation and started the New Testament now in Bangui, and I'm looking forward to going back and being able to work with him again, I hope. They did do a follow-up workshop that they made a couple of revisions to this alphabet that we came up with, because they had some experience. They tested it out. Up here on the top is an orthograph experimental. It's the experimental or a provisional orthography that they're supposed to go out and use it and see how it works. Does this work well for us? Does this make sense? And then they come back and they can say, okay, yeah, the way we decided to do this doesn't work very well. Can we find a different way to do it? And we adjust. There's several things that they have multiple options that they can go with. And so if there's something that doesn't work, well, we can try this other option instead. And breaking news this week.
This was like this week, and this was posted today on Facebook by our director, so I tossed it in there just to share.
This week, there are 3 other of the languages there that are doing that follow-up workshop. And so they're working on reviewing the alphabet that they designed a few years ago, and then they actually, do you want to read this?
I'll just read it.
Yeah.
So from our director today, first scripture, representatives from 3 language communities, Kra, Yaka, and Magongo, just went through a rigorous 3-week process to identify the sounds in their language and the best way to write these sounds. By the end, they'd each written down a collection of folk tales from the region and a Christmas story from the Gospel of Luke, just in time for the season. So the first slide, or the first picture there, is actually a picture of their little booklets that they printed with the Gospel of Luke in whose languages, the first scripture ever written in those languages. So that was just this week in time for Christmas. We were excited about that.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of work that Brian's involved in, and obviously it's continuing without us there, but
Since there
this
are,
is what we want to go back to and help.
as far as I know, there aren't going to be a lot of teams that need the scripture publication work that I can do. I'm probably going to be doing a lot more of these kinds of workshops, which is fine with me. If I can do several more workshops with Ginger, that would be amazing, because we really work well together, and she's got so much experience that I want to glean from her as while I can before she retires. And so I want to do as many workshops with her, but then also go back to Bangui as much as I can and do some there too. And that's what I'm training, taking my master's degree in linguistics for, is so that I can do this kind of work. And so I want to jump in there and do it as much as I can. So while we were there, I'll let Rachel tell you what she did. The first 2 years she was busy with kids.
We had a 4-month-old. About 2022, I was able to, the kids were all in school, the littlest one was starting preschool, and I was able to also have a babysitter come part of the time, Henry and Lily. And so I was able to work up to 15, 20 hours a week on the communications and prayer, which was basically keeping in touch with people in CAR and the language projects, and then communicating their prayer needs to people via Facebook. We had a weekly blog post that we would do. She's still doing all that. I'm not right now because I'm here. But one of the things I put together is, I was telling this table about it before, but this calendar thing. The front little map is most of the language is spoken in CAR, and the bigger ones are larger groups, and the smaller ones have fewer people. And then they're kind of by the location of where the language is spoken in the country. The inside is just a perpetual month of prayer for the people in, like the Bible list people groups in CAR. Like you pray through it for a month and then start over again and pray through it again, is the idea. And the part I want to share especially is the last page. And this is 2 years old, so a little bit more has even started. But as of that time, this is what was being done in the languages that didn't have a Bible translation project started yet. Some of them had initial linguistic workshops, like they've started an alphabet and started making materials in the language. Trauma healing, there's been so much unrest, civil war, most of the people are traumatized. And so SAL does quite a bit of trauma healing work in that area. And some of them have a Jesus film either working on or available, and they take it out to the village and do projection equipment and speakers and just show the Jesus film to the people. They make it available to the churches. And there were those 8 new projects that were started in 2022. At the time I made this, it was new enough, they were kind of feeling it out and just starting them. Several of those were just starting the alphabet process and figuring out the languages. So I wasn't even allowed to call it a translation project yet, but all 8 of those have continued, and they are now starting to produce scripture, and we can call it a translation project now. So those 8 do have, beginning to have Bible done in their language.
Capra's in the process of starting another round.
So, that's what I did. I put together tools like this. I updated the Facebook page, did the blog posts, made sure to keep our maps and prayer questions up to date. There would be people asking what's going on with this language group, and I would find out and let them know and that kind of stuff. So that was really exciting. For me, I really enjoyed just keeping up on what was going on with languages and being able to pray for them and to share that with people. So that was really fun for me. Stay on.
So when we came back last year, it was June 2023. The plan was we had bought a house from Africa, and we had actually given money to a friend to buy a truck for us as well. And so the idea was for us to just be able to land and not hit the ground running, but be able to land and just be here and not have to worry about where are we going to live, what are we going to do. We couldn't really live with grandma and grandpa long term because that would have been, we're 9 people and just filled their house really full. And what are we going to do during the winter? So we thought, okay, this will be great. Buy a house. Well, the market was really, all prices everywhere have gone up on houses. And so the house that we got have a lot of repairs that needed to be done, and we ended up actually discovering even more repairs that needed to be done than we even realized. And so we had 4 different parts of it that mushroomed into huge projects, huge remodel projects that just wiped out our funds. We had savings that we thought we were going to be able to put towards it, and it ate those up, and we cranked through some credit cards too. And we did finally get moved in, just like a week before Christmas.
So 6 months.
6 months later.
And we did end up staying with mom and dad, and they were wonderful and gracious, and
Yes.
it was an experience.
And we basically ran out of funds for paying our contractor to work on the house in September on Labor Day. And so from then on, it's been volunteers. Tom has spent several hours with me working on various projects, and it's been a huge help to have him and so many other people helping us work through those things that I'm a linguist, I'm not a construction worker. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I can kind of figure my way through some of it, but not well. And so it's been really a blessing to have that support and help. And we have several more projects that are still left to do before we leave next year, and then we want to rent it out while we're gone. So if any of you guys are up for it, have the knowledge and experience to do construction, we'd love to have that help. This is some of our kids jumping in. They did a lot of the work. Micah doing some drilling or driving some screws there, some Seth and the littles doing some painting. They did so many other projects, and it was great to see them investing too. I think that was good for them. They're living in the house now. They can say, I did that, or I did that.
Sweat equity.
Yeah. And it makes for more ownership of a place too.
Personal,
Yeah. So this year, ideally, the idea was for me to be able to finish my master's degree by the end of next semester, so like May 2025. The school actually has a deadline that I'm supposed to finish by then, or things get complicated. And it's not looking like I'm going to be able to do that, but I'm hoping they'll be able to give me an extension, and I have one more semester beyond. So we'll go back next year, and I'll have one more semester that I can do from Cameroon and just crank it out together. I switched. I'm not doing a thesis anymore. I'm just doing comprehensive exams. It's just better. I mean, it's still big, but it's not quite the same scale, and so it's going to be better for our family for me to do it that way. So I really need the master's degree though, because one, I need the tools to be able to be a good linguist and make a contribution there, solid contribution. But I also, the countries that I'm working in when they want to give me a visa, they're going to want to know, do you bring value to our country? Your recommendations that you're making, are they viable? Can we rely on them to be, solid? Or are you just some fly-by-night kid that came in and says, oh, we should do this? So that master's degree says, hey, I've put in some time and effort on this, and I have I might not be an expert, know absolutely everything, but I know a little bit, what I'm talking about. So the idea is for us to return to Cameroon is end CAR next summer, July or August, somewhere in there. And we'll be there for another 4 years. Micah will not go with us because he's graduated and he's going to stay here and figure out what to do next. But the other kids will go with us. I'll probably do some of the technical checks and do some of that kind of work with these new teams, doing a little bit at a time as we go along so that it's not quite as much to do at the end. But probably more focused on the linguistic workshops, doing as many more of those as I can. And also, once I'm done with my degree, I'm hoping that we can have Rachel start doing a degree working on her master's, I think she'll probably be able to enjoy it more than I have. She's so much more of an academic than I am. She actually likes school. I mean, that helps a lot, right? She likes studying, and I'm getting through it, and I like the subject matter, but it's still just really hard for me to read and have all this interaction just on Zoom. I'd much rather be there in person, but it worked out so much better for our family to just stay here this whole 2 years. But I'd really love to see Rachel be able to get in there and get her degree just in time for our kids to be old enough that she could start working part-time or full-time with a degree as well and making her own contribution. Now, some of the things that need to happen between now and then, one of the biggest things that Wycliffe is looking at is the budget that they set for us. They say, okay, for a family of 9 to live in Cameroon, you need this much. And we're actually 17% short. We found out about some families this week that are not able to keep going, keep supporting us. And so that number went back up a little bit. But we're trusting God that that's going to come together between now and then, and that the monthly support helps us with living expenses here, and then will help us with going back to Cameroon as well. Praying for my master's degree, just focus and determination, and really being able to soak up what I'm learning and not just mesmerizing something and then be done with it. I really want to learn. And then a good launch for Micah. He's got a lot to figure out, and he doesn't know really what he wants to do with his life. He's not got a vision. He wants to go to college and do this, and he's going to go do that. He's kind of figuring it out still. So we're trying not to push him too hard. And then over the course of our 4 years that we're there, we'll have 3 more kids graduate. So we'll have Mike graduate, I graduate, Janae graduates. 5 of us graduate in 6 years. It's going to be nuts. And then, we are going back as a family of 9, even though Mike is not going with us because we're going to have a anyway. So all of our Cameroonian friends are going to be surprised. Every African that I've talked to loves the fact that we have a big family. And they're like, oh, you need to add another 10. No, it's okay. I've been saying 7 is the number of completion, but God is like, no, it's not. Not for you. So I got to come up with some other reason why. And just praying for the translation teams in CAR for good progress for them, and good connections with their community that they can do all the testing that they need to do, and good relationships within their team.
Travels for those areas.
Yeah.
For Davros, standards, all kinds of things.
2 of the older teams recently lost a translator. One of them back in January or February, and the other one more recently. And that just, when you spend that much time together, 10 years more working with the 3 of you, to lose one of you is just really big. And so for them to be able to adjust for that. The Luto, they're in their final stages, and they just lost one of their guys. And so that's seems like that could be a setback, but it could also be exactly what they need. Who knows? The way God works sometimes, right? He does things opposite of what we think he should do sometimes, but it actually works out better. So I'm still holding out for how our time back in the States has turned out opposite than we expected. God, how are you going to redeem this? But we'll know, someday. Maybe when we get to heaven. Now, ending with just a thank you for you guys. Some of you we've known for a long time, some of you we just met recently, but it's important to us to have cheerleaders, to have prayer warriors, of course, we need financial supporters as well, but we also need just the relationship. We've had churches, like we have a church in Spokane that supports us $1,000 a month, but we don't really have a relationship with them. And so, if I had to choose between the two, I'd rather have the relationship and the prayer and the we're with you solidarity. But this is how Wycliffe says we're going to do this. We're not supported by a denomination. It's not a profit-bearing venture that we're just going to be able to do a 10-acre job and make money. And so we have to rely on the church here in America to support us. And so that's where we're at. But we've been really thankful for that model since we've been with Wycliffe, because it's forced us to connect with people. It's forced us to reach out more than we would just in our natural inclination. And so we've made some really good friends through that, and we've met some amazing people and met some really cool churches that we would have never met otherwise. And so it's good for us. It's challenging, but it's good. And so
we see part of our role as we're doing this work over there, but we're also helping connect people back here to the field and helping people they like to pray for, helping people that feel like they have a part of what God's doing and places in the world. So it's really
So we've got materials here, like Rachel was explaining. We've got prayer cards and our
we have
profile.
dessert.
So we do have dessert.
Dessert. I wasn't able to get coffee or tea, but there's some water and we have pie and cake and fruit. So.
I have a piece of paper back there in the back that you can sign up for newsletters. Email's great, but if you'd rather not do email, if you want to do paper, we can do that too.
And we should explain the little elephants. There's a leather worker who is also working with language development in northern Cameroon. And he does purses and all kinds of things as his main job. And he made these little elephants and sold them to Brian at cost and said, sell these for me in America and use the profits and donate it to the Bible translation work in CAO. So this is a Cameroonian guy who wants to make the donation he can toward the work.
I connected with him and we just talked back and forth, and I was kind of his point person in Yaoundé. And so then he knew that I was connected to CAR, and he's like, I want to give back. I want to invest in Bible translations. So he suggested this. So
these are available. Suggested donation is $3, but you can give more if you choose. But those are available if anyone's interested in that as well.
Limited supply. I think this is it.
Tell us about your vest. Where is it from exactly?
This is from Northwest Cameroon. Traditionally, this would have been, the black would be burlap. They would color it black somehow. But just in the last, 50 years or so, velvet has become available, and so they like doing this. This would be like a celebration.
Yeah, a
wedding, or even like we went to a Christmas party and there's a couple guys wearing that.
Now, what would they wear under it? Or what would they wear?
It would just usually be either you would wear a white t-shirt or nothing, and just bare arms.
And then the pants would be like kind of baggy.
But then their arms would be darker. So.
That's what you got. Well, they were nice things.
It would be freezing.
Khakis or anything, but yeah. Matching dress.
What is the fiddle supposed to do?
I think this is actually it's one of the instruments that they use. It's kind of like, it's two cowbells that are slightly different tones, and so they bang them.
And what's the different
I think this is the drum.
Oh, a drum.
This is the drum. I think there's some stuff on the back too.
Oh yeah, all the little hats.
No, there's some of them that are actually other instruments, I think.
Oh, okay.
It
No?
looks just like a little hat.
I haven't looked.
Yeah, it looks like a sign.
That hat that goes with it.
It's warm.
If I were to go out to the village with that hat, I would get in big trouble because it's one that the chief is allowed to wear only.
Just say a chief of linguistics.
Yeah, somebody gave him the hat, and we're just like, okay, but.
Well, no, I bought it
you
I bought it at a market or something.
Okay, there's that one, like,
Yeah.
But we actually knew a missionary who was working in a village in that area, and the chief of that area had made him one of his, like, elder kind of
Advisors,
people.
yeah.
Like the fawn is the name of the, they call the chief, and he made him a phi. And so then he had to wear the hat at all times if he was going out.
Who was this?
A missionary friend that we
Oh,
One of our colleagues that
a
was
long
there.
time ago. But like he said that it actually impacted his impacted like
Oh,
his impact in the village. It wasn't a good thing. Older men in the village would not speak to him or wouldn't look him in the eye out of respect because he had been made
It put barriers
elder.
between
Oh,
So it
I
put
see.
barriers
of
So,
respect.
which is interesting. Some of these cultural things.
Yeah, very backwards.
It probably gave some positives as well.
Yeah.
People would listen to him when they wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
Well, can I have a volunteer to pray and then we can have some dessert? And I'll be back at the table too, like we can talk about the things that are back there. Oh, there's the coins back there too. Grab a coin.